In terms of taking over Iraq and Syria, ISIS is progressing, although much more slowly. They can't stay out in the open, but they are progressing. Notwithstanding the air power attacks that the U.S.-led coalition's been undertaking, they're still able to progress. It's forcing them more and more to meld more into the population, which makes it much more difficult to bomb. So consequently, that's going to be their tactic for now in trying to extend themselves even further on. I know they want to get more and more into Syria. Certainly Kobani is going to be a big target for them to hit in Syria. They basically want to take over all of Syria and get into the more of the western portion of Syria that is the Shiite dominated area of the Alawites, and there could be more problems that are going to exist. And if they meld more into the population, bombing is going to be much more difficult to do. So I see while we might intensify the bombing, it hasn't really reversed ISIS's forward progression. It's slowed it down somewhat, but it has not reversed it. Baghdad Airport is one airport, and it's been under siege before by ISIS. There have been some sporadic attacks by ISIS. But it does show, because of their increase in influx into Anbar province, which butts up against Baghdad, that the airport is becoming much more vulnerable to potential attack. And as I said, there have been periodic attacks already, even further south from Baghdad, which indicates that ISIS's reach is actually extending beyond Baghdad in some cases. But in terms of having a massive army coming into Baghdad, I think it's going to be more problematic because for one thing, the United States has assets in Baghdad. Of course, we have the green zone. We have the U.S. embassy there, and the airport, which is the only airport there, has to be protected at all costs because it's the only means for evacuation. If that is overrun, then we're not going to be able to get our troops out or bring in supplies to reinforce those who are there. But with ISIS, you're dealing with an ideology. And we basically are at war once again with an ideology that is very extreme in terms of ISIS's interpretation of the Quran. That isn't to say that all Islam is bad. It's not, but but their interpretation of Islam and the Quran and taking a literal sense of it is what is creating the difficulties that we're now confronting, and what other minorities throughout the area that they've occupied are now facing in terms of executions, summary executions, and death and torture and what have you. And this has got to stop. And the possibility of many of these fighters coming back from the war front in Syria and Iraq into the United States and into other countries is something that our national security authorities are very concerned about and are watching. And the problem is we cannot identify all of them, and we know some of them, not all of them, and that's the problem, because we're going to have increasing elements of lone wolves that will begin to mimic or become so radicalized by the successes of ISIS in other parts of the world that they may take off on their own here in the United States, and we've seen some recent examples of that. As far as ISIS in the next few months is concerned, we're approaching the winter time over there, and it's going to make it much more problematic to cope with them, which works to their advantage actually, because they have changed their tactics. They change their tactics according to terrain, according to the battlefield situation. ISIS is very adept at doing that, and I would anticipate that they are going to want to make some moves before winter really sets in, and not get stuck up in the mountains someplace, particularly north of Lebanon. If they can get through the mountains before winter really sets in, then I see potentially Lebanon being threatened.